Welcome, everybody. I have been mentioning the entire festival that we dedicate this days to our city, our sister city of Los Angeles, and we've been partnering with Direct Relief to raise support for the LA communities affected by the fire. They will be matching our donations up to 100,000 and to double our impact. Direct Relief will have booth in the lobby throughout the entire festival. They're out there tonight. So please be generous, and our hearts and thoughts are with our LA community. We love Los Angeles. A very special thank you to Lexus, the new presenting sponsor of SBIFF. There are Lexus vehicles during the festival in front of the film center. Take a test drive. I have been riding on the Lexus all over downtown Santa Barbara. Pretty smooth ride, pretty nice. Thank you to the generous support of the Manitou Fund, Nora McNeely Hurley, Michael Hurley, and the Manitou Fund. Thank you so much. And the board of directors. Thank you to the board of directors. We have the 5 nominated directors for the Oscars here. Unbelievable. I'm super excited. This is quite an evening, and you're in incredible hands with the moderator, Scott Feinberg. He's been doing this for, I lose track, it must be like 15 years or more. He's the Hollywood Reporter's executive editor of award. This is a really long title, Scott. What the Hollywood Reporter's executive editor of awards coverage and host of its Awards Chatter podcast. I got that. Thank you. Please welcome. And most importantly, he's a good friend of mine. So here's Scott. That's quite a title.
Thank you, Roger. Appreciate it. Hello, everyone. It's great to be back here at the Santa Barbara International Film Festival generally, but specifically for this evening, which is always so exciting, and particularly this year because, as you've just heard, we're honoring 5 remarkable filmmakers who happen to be the same 5 remarkable filmmakers who are nominated this year for the Best Director Oscar. This is the only time that they will be convening in public together prior to that big night on March 2nd, so we're very lucky to have them. They range in age from 72 to 36. 3 are Americans, 2 are French. They are all first-time Best Director Oscar nominees, and they are all also nominated for producing, meaning their films are nominated for Best Picture, and for writing, meaning their films are nominated for either Best Adapted or Best Original Screenplay. One of them, as you'll hear, is also nominated for songwriting. So, in other words, this is an unbelievably talented group that we have here tonight. We are going to get into all of it, but let me just quickly explain the format. As with the wonderful Virtuosos evening last night, where we honored breakthrough performers from the year, tonight we are going to speak with each of the honorees individually, and then we are going to bring them all back at the end for a group conversation, which should be a lot of fun. So what we are going to do first is introduce a clip of our first honoree. He is a Frenchman who was nominated for the Best Director Golden Globe, Critics' Choice, and Directors Guild Awards, and is nominated for the Best Director BAFTA and Academy Awards. Let's take a look at a scene from Amelia Perez, directed by Jacques Audiard. Please welcome to the Santa Barbara International Film Festival, one of our outstanding directors of the year, Jacques Audiard. And accompanied by his translator, Nicholas. Thank you. Welcome.
Welcome. Ça va? How's everybody doing?
Il y a toujours ces lumières incroyables.
There's always this incredible light.
Well, thank you.
Partout où je vais, il y a des lumières comme ça.
Everywhere I go, there's light like this.
Well, thank you for being here. Very cool hat. And I want to begin by establishing just how big a lover of film you are. Can you explain the history of the place where you live, where your home, Jacques?
L'histoire de l'endroit où j'habite à Paris.
The history of the place I live in Paris.
On vous a informé, vous.
You've been given some information.
I've heard a little bit. I would love to confirm, though.
C'est que j'habite un ancien cinéma, le Pâté Bagnolet.
I live in a former movie theater, the Pâté Bagnolet.
Et mon appartement, j'ai 2 appartements. Celui dans lequel je vis est du côté de l'écran.
So my apartment, there's 2 apartments, and the one that I live in is on the side of the screen,
Symboliquement, c'est quand même assez fort, non?
which symbolically is a pretty heavy statement.
Well, you have made so many interesting and varied films over the years. I will reference some of the past ones in a moment, but let's just talk about how you, a Frenchman, wound up making a Spanish language musical about a cartel leader who turns out is trans. This is not something that would have occurred to everyone. What was the spark of the idea?
Vous sous-estimez énormément les Français, en fait.
You're really underestimating French people.
C'est-à-dire que quand même, tout à coup, j'ai l'impression de me vanter, mais avant, j'ai fait un film sur des Tamouls qui parlaient tamil.
You know, suddenly I feel like I'm bragging, but before this, I did make a film about Tamil people in which they were speaking Tamil,
C'est-à-dire que je n'ai rien compris pendant le tournage.
which is to say that I didn't understand a word while we were shooting.
En tout cas, suffisamment pour mettre en scène.
At least I did understand enough to direct the film.
But I mean, this one in particular, I heard you were thinking about, you wanted to make an opera. So what do you think inspired that? And how does that then evolve into a screenplay and a film?
Je pense qu'en fait, le film musical m'attendait depuis longtemps. Mon deuxième film, en anglais Self-Made Hero, nous avions pensé avec le musicien Alexandre Desplat en faire un petit opéra déjà. Et donc c'est une idée qui a suivi son chemin. Et que si je peux continuer
Oui,
encore.
vas-y.
Alors j'y vais. C'est comment si je suis... quand je vous parlais d'un film que j'ai fait tourner entièrement en tamil. Je crois que finalement, ce qui m'intéressait là-dedans, c'est la musicalité des langues. Voilà, je fais un film en espagnol, je ne parle pas en espagnol, mais la musicalité de la langue me bouleverse. Je fais un western de Sister Brothers, je ne parle pas l'anglais, vous le constatez, et je le regrette. Là aussi, c'est la musicalité de la langue qui me bouleverse.
I think that the musical was actually waiting for me for a long time. My second feature film, A Self-Made Hero, the composer Alexandre Desplat and I had thought of turning that one into a small opera. And so I think that this idea lived on and followed its path. As you mentioned, I made a film entirely in Tamil. And I think what interests me there is the musicality of the language. You know, I've made a film in Spanish. I don't speak Spanish. It's the musicality of that language that really emotionally reaches me. I made a Western, Sister Brothers. As you've noticed, I don't speak English, and I'm so sorry that I don't. But again, it's the musicality of the language that speaks to me.
Yeah. So on a just practical level, how does that work though? When your stars in this movie, Amelia Perez, Carla's from Spain, Zoe and Selena are American. They don't speak French, as far as I've heard.
No.
So, like, maybe, sir, you're there. Maybe somebody else. Is it just literally being translated, or is it maybe you don't need things exactly spelled out? Maybe it's more just kind of impressions?
C'est drôle ce que vous me dites là, parce que quand j'ai commencé, alors j'espère répondre quand même à votre question. Quand j'ai commencé Sister Brothers, c'était avec Joaquin Phoenix et John C. Reilly, et on se voit un petit peu 2, 3 jours ou 4 jours avant le tournage. Et comme je ne parle pas anglais ou mal, je le comprends, mais je ne le parle pas, je demande à Joaquin, comment veux-tu que nous communiquions? Il me regarde et me dit, par télépathie.
It's funny what you're saying. I'll try to get back to this and answer your question. But when I started making Sister Brothers, this Western in English, which was starring Joaquin Phoenix and John C. Reilly, I basically understand English, but I don't speak it. So we had been working for a few days before the shoot, 3-4 days. And I said to Joaquin, how do you want us to communicate? And he looked at me and he said, telepathy.
Et ça marche parfois, hein?
And sometimes it works.
Pas tout le temps.
Not always.
So people should understand you're not, you did work with Camille and Clément Ducol. These are songwriters who are nominated for, actually composers also, song and score. One of the 2 songs from the film that is nominated is called El Mal, and you also are a writer of that. This is now Critics' Choice, Golden Globe. I mean, it's been recognized all over. When did you begin writing music yourself?
Pourquoi j'ai commencé.
Quand est-ce que tu as commencé à toi-même écrire de la musique?
Ah non, jamais.
No, never.
Well, you are.
Non, c'est pas ça. C'est comment Camille, qui écrivait les paroles, me demandait de lui fournir ce qu'elle appelait en anglais des hooks, des hameçons. C'est-à-dire que je lui fournissais des débuts, des lignes, des débuts de chansons sur lesquels elle accrochait ses paroles après. C'est ma participation extrêmement modeste en tant que parolier.
What happened is that Camille was writing the lyrics to these songs, and she would ask me to give her what she called in English hooks, which were lines that I would write that were like the beginning of the songs on which she would hook her own lyrics. And so that's my extremely modest participation as a lyric writer.
Got it. Well, how about, you get on to, I think a soundstage is where you guys did this in Europe, standing in for Mexico. But the opportunity, as somebody who I know was very familiar with Golden Age Hollywood musicals and all of that, to now be directing some of these huge musical numbers, like Zoe's Going Through the Streets in one of them, and just a lot of them are huge productions. What was it like? I don't think you would have had anything in your prior experience that would have necessarily prepared you for that. What was that like to be doing, something that Vincent Minnelli or somebody could have been doing 60 years ago? More than that.
Pourquoi je fais pas l'âge que j'ai, c'est ça?
You mean that I look older than I am?
No. I think we got a little lost in translation there, but
On est reçu ici.
What a warm welcome.
yeah, no. No, but these.
Ah, mais je peux parler soyons sérieux.
Now let's be serious now.
Alors, c'est quoi le fond de la question en fait?
Le fond de la question, c'est quelle impression ça te faisait de tourner des grands numéros,
Oui.
chanter, danser, ce que tu n'avais fait.
Ce que j'ai jamais fait avant. Non, franchement, on avait beaucoup moins de moyens que. On avait beaucoup moins de moyens que les gros films musicaux américains, les Busby Berkeley, les Minnelli et tout ça. Moi, c'est une comédie musicale. J'aime pas trop le mot comédie d'ailleurs. C'est un drame musical modeste. Et alors moi, ça a été pour la première fois, mais la première fois de ma vie, c'était un choc, une découverte. J'ai adoré ça, de travailler en studio. J'ai vraiment adoré ça. Et que tout à coup, j'avais la possibilité d'amener une stylisation que le décor naturel ne m'aurait jamais permis.
Well, we actually had a lot less means than the big American musicals, Busby Berkeley, Vincente Minnelli. I would call what we did a modest musical. So it was my first time doing a musical, but it was also my first time working on entirely in a studio. And that for me was both a shock and a tremendous discovery. I absolutely loved doing it because working in the studio allowed me to attain a level of stylization that I never could have had in real locations.
Well, we are so glad you're here. We will note 13 Oscar nominations. You're somebody who's been recognized with probably more prizes out of Cannes than anyone out there over the years for your many films.
Faut pas le dire, faut pas le dire.
Don't say that.
We'll keep it between us in this room.
Parce que j'en attends encore.
But
Because I'm expecting more.
there's no, of course. But I mean, this is something where to have the international recognition for a film like in the way that this has happened, again, 13 Oscar nominations, the most of any film, not only this year, but any year with the exception of All About Eve, Titanic, and La La Land had one more. So it's a pretty amazing thing. Thank you for being here. We'll see you in a few minutes. Stay for 1 second. Great to have you. What we are...
Merci.
We are going to quickly introduce a clip of our next honoree, and then we'll see you back after. But first, here we go. Our second honoree is an American whose film won the Palme d'Or this year and who personally was nominated for the Best Director Gotham, Golden Globe, and Critics' Choice Awards, and who this weekend won the top prizes at the Critics' Choice, Producers Guild, and Directors Guild Awards, and who is nominated for the Best Director, BAFTA, and Academy Awards. Let's take a look at a scene from Anora, directed by Sean Baker. Please welcome Sean Baker. How was your weekend?
Oh, uneventful.
Well, thank you for being here. And I think, as with Jacques, before we talk about your 2024 wonderful film, I want to just kind of make sure people are aware a little bit about you. And from my understanding and interactions with you over the years, you are like the biggest film lover out there. You are, I mean, you have the coolest collection of movie posters of anybody I know. I think you if anybody goes and watches your Criterion Closet talk, you're like the film professor we all wish we had. Just what was the root of your love of movies? How did this all begin?
The root. Oh,
Yeah.
wow. My mother. My mother introduced me to the movies when I was 5 years old. Actually, she brought me to the local library in Milburn, New Jersey, where they were showing clips. Oh, okay, Milburn, New Jersey, out there. And there was they were showing clips from the Universal monster films. So it was like a moment from The Mummy, a moment from Dracula, and they got to Frankenstein. It was that burning windmill sequence, James Whale's 1931 Frankenstein, and my God, it just burned right into the prefrontal cortex. It was like, and the next morning I woke up and I told my mother, I want to make movies. So, and they were very supportive. They allowed me to do the Super 8 movies and then moving into VHS and then supporting me while I went to film school. So, yeah.
That's great. Now, what I wonder is if there's any rhyme or reason in terms of things that you've studied or read about, or like, why is it 5 of the 8 feature films you've directed, The Extraordinary Starlet, Tangerine, Florida Project, Red Rocket, and now Anora, have prominently featured, dealt with, covered in different ways the experiences of people who do sex work? What is it that piqued your interest about that?
Well, I actually think it was the research I did for Starlet. On Starlet, it came from some interactions I had with adult film stars on a television show, and I was friends with them, and I kind of saw behind the curtain, you know, the everyday mundane part of their lives, and I was like, maybe I would like to tell a story that focuses on them as people and not the livelihood, not their career. Because that's how they are defined, and I don't think that's fair. So that really one led to the next, because befriending sex workers, hearing stories. You know, I heard a million stories. And so, you know, there were just, I could keep doing this. I never wanted it to become a shtick, though. It really happened organically. For example, after Red Rocket, I thought I was going to be making a film about drug user activism, but there was this other story that came up about you know, a young dancer and an escort, and I felt it was the time to tell that story. So, yeah.
Now when writing Honora, or the spark for writing Honora, I think you've said was the home invasion sequence. The initial thing was that I think you said that made you want to write the rest of it. Can you talk about that? Because that is in the middle of this film, for people who need a reminder. I mean, I think it's like 20-minute sequence.
28 minutes, yeah.
28 minutes.
Yeah.
And so just, you know, kinetic and exciting and crazy. So I could see how that might be. But so you literally, it starts there and then you build around that?
I had this idea being based on a few stories I heard of a young woman being held collateral for something that her husband did in the Russian mob. And I was trying to figure out, okay, what would happen if suddenly she had no idea what was going on and had to deal with who in a what she thought was a life-threatening situation. So, you know, this and I also knew that I was going to be setting up this film in a way that was almost an abridged version of a Hollywood rom-com, and then immediately slamming us into something totally very different, and just making us sit with this in almost in Annie's position of having to deal with this very scary, drawn-out, real-time scene. I wanted the audience to sit in that. So that was, something in which was one of the very early ideas, and something that had to be, because it plays out in real time, continuity was vital. And the entire cast and crew had to adapt because it was different from the style that we were shooting the rest of the film with. And it was really exhilarating. I mean, it took us 8 days. Mikey and Yura did their own stunts. It was incredible to watch. We shot it in order. It was a challenge. I think we did it because of the challenge.
It's great. Now, you mentioned Mikey and Yura. This is now Oscar-nominated Best Actress, Mikey Madison, and Best Supporting Actor, Yura Borsov. I wonder if you can talk about how you cast your films, because it seems like you are always thinking outside of the box, versus, you know, the way maybe conventionally things are done. Like Tangerine, for instance, the film you made entirely with iPhones. These are first-time actors, people who have in many cases lived experiences that are relevant to the movie. Florida Project, you find an incredible young kid at the time, Brooklyn Prince. Red Rocket, you basically revive the career of Simon Rex and find Susanna Sun, this actress who was like at a movie theater, I think you met her. And now we've got these two terrific talents, but had never had a platform like this. So like, how do you generally approach casting, and these two in particular? How did we end up with these two now new Oscar nominees?
Sure. Well, we try to mix it up. I actually, I cast the films along with my wife and producer, Samantha Kwan, and she really takes a major part of it, especially fleshing out most of my supporting cast. But what was interesting with this film is that there weren't as many first-timers. My whole main cast and most of my supporting cast, seasoned professionals. And when it came to Mikey, no audition process, easiest casting ever. I saw her in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, was blown away by her performance, and knew, as somebody who casts my own films, okay, I'm going to file her in the back of my head as somebody I may want to work with someday, or I want to work with someday. Then a few years later, when we were moving forward with Honora, we just happened to go to Scream opening weekend, and her performance in that is wonderful. It's full of humor. It shows the attitude. And it was really just a combination of those two performances. And I turned to Samantha while in the theater, and I said, she's our Annie. we're calling her agent the second we step out of the theater, and she happens to have the same agent as Brooklyn Prince,
Oh my
so it made
God.
things easy.
Yeah.
And then Yura I saw in a beautiful film called Compartment Number 6, a Finnish film by Juho Kuusmasen, and we were there we were at Cannes the same year together when I had Red Rocket, and I had already been developing a Nora and knew there was going to be this heavy character of Igor. So he was pre-cast too. Both of them were cast before I wrote the screenplay, which was really wonderful because I was able to have their face and their auras in mind while writing this.
You also have a kind of lucky charm who has run through all of your films. Can you tell us who that is?
Well, he was the third one pre-cast. That's Karan Karagulian. And
please.
No, he plays Toros in the film. And yes, he's been in every one of my films. He played Willem Dafoe's boss in the Florida Project. He had a major role as a cab driver in Tangerine. And it was actually, this film probably exists because of him, quite honestly. It does. Because after, he has ties to this world. He's Armenian American who came over after the fall of the Soviet Union and found himself in Brighton Beach, has a lot of stories from that world, and married a Russian American, Lana, who plays his wife in the church scene. So, he's connected. And it was really him who really opened the world to us. And it was our goal together to eventually tell a story that took place in this world.
And to come back to your being such a cineast, this movie, you also, I think very deliberately, there are a lot of kind of stylistic references and things to the 70s Hollywood, right? Is that a favorite period of yours, or why? And talk about how that manifests in Anora.
Well, I grew up with 70s cinema. I adore it. It has such a, for me, it's classic. And so I always when I talk to my wonderful DP, Drew Daniels, about the looks of these films, he shot both Red Rocket and Anora. I say, I know these are contemporary stories, but I want the look to have the DNA of 1974. I want it to look like we shot in 1974. So we used the techniques that were used then. We shoot on film. We shot on 35 millimeter film. We sometimes flash the negatives so that we could get an extra little bit of luminance in those nighttime scenes, which is essentially a no-no these days because of insurance. You're not supposed to touch your negative. So we used older techniques in order to, I think, achieve this look.
And even your posters and things are very thought through, right?
Yes, and that's what I love. Neon has been incredible as a distributor here in the United States. They really have we work together to say, if this film was put out in the 70s or 80s, how would it be promoted? And they really leaned into that. I love the key art that they've come up with and the images that they use to really promote this film and get it out there.
That's great. Well, for, a lot of us got very excited about this movie in Cannes. Clearly, more and more people have caught up with it since, as we saw this weekend, and it's great to have you here. So thank you for this. And,
all right.
We are going to now introduce our third honoree of the evening. He is a 36-year-old American who won the Venice Film Festival's Best Director Prize and the Best Director Golden Globe Award, was nominated for the Best Director Critics' Choice and Directors Guild Awards, and is nominated for the Best Director BAFTA and Academy Awards. Let's take a look at a scene from The Brutalist, directed by Brady Corbet. Please welcome Brady Corbet.
Hello.
Thanks for being here, Brady. It's great to see you. And before we dive into The Brutalists, can you tell us a little bit about your wonderful writing partner, Mona Fastfold, and how you guys came to know and work with each other?
We were introduced through a mutual friend years ago. Mona was married to someone else. And now we have a 10-year-old daughter, and we've made a lot of films together.
It's true. And this one, I know people should know, 7 years in the making, right? And I wonder if you can just tell us a little bit about what came first, sort of were you already someone, and the two of you, were you people who were particularly interested in, post-war period or architecture, any of the things that come together to make this such an interesting film, or just how did you? It's such an intricate story that I just can't help but wonder where it began.
All of my films that I've made are about post-traumatic stress and post-traumatic generations. My first film was about the 6 months leading up to the signing of the Treaty of Versailles that inadvertently paved the way for fascist uprising during the interwar period. The film after that, Vox, was a film about post Columbine, post 9/11 American psychology and how that shaped the culture. And so, of course, I wanted to do something on the post-war years after the Second War. And, brutalism is a style of architecture that came about in the 1950s. So it seemed to me that post-war psychology and post-war architecture were sort of intrinsically linked. So it was a subject I was interested in. And I read a book called Marcel Breuer and a Committee of 12 Build a Church, about Marcel Breuer working on St. John's Abbey. And that was sort of the jumping off point for the whole thing.
So for the architect character played by Adrian Brody in your film, was Breuer the primary influence, or were there other architects? Was it a kind of an amalgam, or how did you come to him?
Well, I mean, Breuer was certainly a jumping off point because what was formerly the Whitney, and then was the Met Breuer, and then it was the Frick, and now it's Sotheby's, is an extraordinary building and probably my favorite building in New York. But, the reality is that Walter Gropius actually, was able to station all of his favorite architects that were already very well established at American universities in the 1930s after the Nazis shut down the Bauhaus. And so I went to Jean-Louis Cohen, who sadly passed away a couple of years ago, but was an extraordinary architectural scholar who wrote the book on Corbusier, the big Taschen book. I think it's Taschen or Phaidon. And I brought one question to him, which was, can you give me provide me with a single example of someone who got stuck in the quagmire of the Second War and survived and was able to start, up with their firm again in the 1950s elsewhere. He asked me to leave it with him for a few days. He got back to me and he said, nope, never happened. And so that, of course, got me thinking about the fact that so many lives were lost. So many livelihoods were lost also. And the way that I was thinking about the project was that it was a sort of monument in and of itself, that it was, we went to the Bauhaus, went through the archives, and we looked at so many of the unrealized projects and buildings from these young designers that must have been so excited in the 1920s. They had a vision for, they couldn't imagine that after the First World War that they would see, something like that again in their lifetimes. And it's absolutely tragic. And so I felt that the character somehow needed to be a sort of amalgamation of all of these visionaries that never got to see their projects through to completion.
Yeah. There's also a great love story in this film, and I know for you and Mona, that was going to be very important from early on as well. Can you just talk about that aspect of things and how maybe that evolved alongside the idea of having brutalism, but also the challenges faced by this couple at the center of the film?
I mean, I think to a certain extent, we wanted to portray a relationship that, that we could relate to.
of course, in a David Lean film or a 1950s melodrama, when she gets off that train, everything would be ideal. But, this is a film being made, 75 years later. Well, I shouldn't have said that about David Lean, because Brief Encounter is actually kind of a very, very sad film. He made many, many very, very nuanced and complex films. But I just mean to say that we wanted there to be a very contemporary resonance, in the relationship, and so they haven't been able to be physical together in almost a decade. And I thought that was really interesting, that they have to find a way to sort of choose each other again. They have to find a way to be physical together again, especially when, both of them have been physically tortured. I mean, so I was thinking so much about my grandfather who fought, in the Second War in the Air Force, and he never brought it up, but he was like in a plane that was shot out of the sky. And I thought about how in the 1950s, especially, you were not encouraged to express yourself, men especially, certainly not children. And so I was just thinking about all of that sort of repression, and it's interesting to me that the 1950s is a period of time that the conservative agenda seems to want to get back to. I find that very strange because, of course, it was a really miserable period in American history, and I can't. My grandmother. My grandmother was a stewardess, and she loved her job. She was. I mean, can you imagine being 19 or 20 years old and you've never left your hometown, and suddenly you're flying for Pan Am, and then you get pregnant and you get fired. And my grandmother had 5 more children, but I think there were more photos of her, in her stewardess days than there were of any of the children in the house, and I thought about that sort of that anguish that she must have lived with for so long, and that which she could never express.
I think there's another thing, yeah. This film, again, we're just kind of talking about some of the different pairings of character dynamics, but you have the architect, played by Adrian Brody, and then the patron, played by Guy Pearce. And you've, I think, likened, you're interested, I get the sense, in the artist-patron relationship, not least probably because you've experienced some of that. I mean, when you went looking for somebody to make a 3.5-hour film with an intermission shot in VistaVision, which hasn't been used since like the 60s, I believe. I'm sure you ran into some skeptical people as well. So anyway, can you just talk about
that's a very polite way of putting it.
Well, just, yeah. I mean,
they were mildly skeptical.
Well, so talk about, though, how the film, what it has to say about that, because I think that seems to be of interest to you, right?
Sure. I mean, listen, building, making a film, which we've spoken about a lot on promotional tour, they're very similar jobs. It's a managerial job. You're curating. You're relying on the support of others, and it requires financing and personnel, and it's not something you can do in your bedroom. And in fact, during COVID, we saw how we really couldn't do this in our bedrooms. Like, I think I saw about 14 or 15 COVID films, and I don't remember any masterpieces. But I think that I think that this sort of tug of war between art and commerce is of course, inherently fascinating, and it's something that I'm sure many of you in this room work in the film industry, and you struggle with this all the time. And it's difficult because you're generally dealing with a representative from a company who actually has very good taste and has, but they're frightened. They're frightened that they're going to lose their job. And so, and when you're making something, you can't operate from a place of fear. You have to operate from a place of power. And I get it. I understand. I'd want to keep my job too. I mean, I'm freelance for life. I know what it feels like to be out of work. But I think that the problem is, of course, the vicious cycle of this, or the result of this, is that, people are making bets that, are safe, quote unquote, safe bets. They're easy to support in a staff meeting. And yet audiences are not coming out to see them because they're so familiar. It's a formula. It's algorithmic content. It's just, and so, all of the films and this crop of films this year are notably very radical, daring, original movies. And whether people love our films or they don't, I think it's impossible not to acknowledge that this is one of the more interesting selections of contenders in a long time. It's predominantly, independent movies made by very radical, filmmakers, and I think that's really exciting. And I'm not really a glass, half full kind of guy, but I feel relatively, sort of, kind of optimistic just tonight.
Well, thank you for sharing one of your more optimistic nights with us. Good to have you here. And
feeling great. Never better. 6 a.m. flight.
Right. Oh God. Well, thank you again for being here, and we're gonna continue in a little bit. But first, I want to introduce our fourth honoree. A clip of her work. She's a French woman who was nominated for the Best Director Golden Globe and Critics' Choice Awards and is nominated for the Best Director BAFTA and Academy Awards. Let's take a look at a scene from The Substance directed by Coralie Fargeat. Please welcome Coralie Fargeat. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Good evening.
I love this movie. I want to ask you to talk a little bit about your path to it, though, before we get into specifics about The Substance. This is only your second feature as a director. Your first, Revenge, played in Toronto and Sundance, was distributed by Neon. This was like 6-7 years ago. And there are some connective threads, right, between this. Is it coincidental? What are those? And is it just coincidental that there are these themes between that they share?
So it's not coincidental at all. I think in Revenge, I first started to express in a very intuitive way things that I were feeling about, the way as I feel being a woman, shapes my relationship to society in a very still unequal way in many ways. And it's something that I needed to release through the genre that I love the most, which is genre film, which allows myself to go very far without any limits and constraints the way I have in my real life. So I really found myself as a filmmaker in Revenge. And when the movie was released, it was coincidental with the Me Too and Weinstein story. And so I had, all the critics and the reception of the film calling the movie being feminist, and I think that's where I discovered that I was a feminist. I think I've always been, but I didn't know it.
And I'm sorry, no, please go on if you.
No, so it was for me a real revelation because I started to be able to put words on things that I think have lived with me my whole life about the way I was feeling about the world, you know. And then I started to document myself much more about, you know, other people writing about that and finding so many interesting and depressing things, you know, about the way the world is still shaped in such an unequal way. And for the substance, I decided this time to make a movie in a very intentional way about everything, you know, I had felt with that in a much more conscious way, and I even wanted to scream louder.
So the thing about, I guess, both of them is also, and not just kind of feminist perspective, but that the way women's bodies are discussed are women are made to feel about their own bodies. All of these things. I mean, for people who haven't yet seen The Substance, essentially, Demi Moore is playing a actress slash personality who's, as she's gotten older in the business, has at one time having been huge, is now less desired by the industry, and wants and is open to doing anything, including taking this mysterious substance to try to correct that. And I wonder, though, this is, to me, not only like the way people talk about it, the first thing is, oh, it's a body horror movie, but to me it's also a great send up of Hollywood and the pressure that that people put on each other and on themselves to, you know, and things now, like, who knows what in 5 years we'll find out Ozempic causes somebody to pop out of your back or whatever. So I just wonder, had you, in going after Hollywood, what had been your experience, whether with Revenge or just generally navigating the business? What had you found Hollywood in your direct interactions with people in the business? You were encountering these kinds of attitudes?
So in fact, for me, Hollywood was unfortunately just a symbol of what's happening everywhere. You know, I think this story is true in every country for every woman since the beginning of humanity. But as I write with symbolism, I make my film through symbolism. I don't write a lot of dialogue. I love to express myself in a visual and visceral way. I'm always looking for the heightened and strongest symbol that's going to represent the story and the idea I want to share. And I think the power, you know, of Hollywood and through symbolism, when you think about the star, just the shape of the star on the Walk of Fame has a whole story inside of it. You know, it's a whole story of how much through, you know, cultural impregnation and diffusion, we have been fed with this idea that if you're beautiful, if you're thin, if you're smiling, then you can be on top. Then you can be under the spotlight and you're going to be famous, you're going to be loved, you're going to be happy. This is the dream, you know, that I grew up with. And Hollywood is just, you know, an incarnation of it. But in all the fairy tales, in all the mythology, you know, we've been told that story. And so when I had this idea of, you know, choosing who my character was going to be, I decided to make her an actress also because it was the heightened symbol of what is it to live through other people's eyes, to take your words from the way people are going to look at you, are going to judge you. And when you please them, it's great. But when they look elsewhere, it's like if your, life was destroyed. And so the second heightened symbol, when I said, okay, so where this actress could be, then came the idea of Hollywood through that Walk of Fame, because even if you've never been to Hollywood, you have an idea of what it is. You have an image, and you have the symbolic image that live, in the unconscious collective mind. That is the dream, that we are sold, and that we would do so many crazy things to try and achieve. And nowadays we have Ozempic, but in all history, it was different products, same story, unfortunately.
So is it purely a coincidence that the shrimp chomping and spitting asshole who uses and abuses the actress in this film, played by Dennis Quaid, is named Harvey?
Well, talking about symbolism, I think, unfortunately, this name became a symbolism in itself of all, the toxic behavior and the way, the world has been shaped and ruled by so much problematic behavior. And what is funny with that scene is that it was a scene I remember doing when I was editing and showing the movie to, very few people. It was a scene that made so many guys uncomfortable. Like, they were like, oh no, come on with those shrimps. Tone down the shrimps, please. The shrimps are really too much. And I was really shocked, because from all the gory, violent, bloody stuff that I thought would disturb people, if I had thought that the shrimps would be the thing, that I would have been asked to tone down, like, I couldn't haven't imagined. And what I learned on my first feature is when there is a scene that makes people very uncomfortable and that make everyone uncomfortable is most of the time because there is something very powerful in that scene. And so I stick to my shrimps, and I'm very happy I did.
It's a shame we can no longer just associate the name with a giant rabbit. Harvey was anyway. Now, Demi Moore, I wonder. You two have teamed up to do something so special here. You've both come out of this experience with, I think, just a whole different array of acclaim and opportunities. And I just wonder, though, I could see that conversation with any actress to cast that part of Elizabeth Sparkle as being, sensitive. You're saying, like, to play this aging actress who has to do as a performer playing her all kinds of daring things. How did you present the idea, and why do you think she was so willing to go there with you?
So this casting process was a real tough challenge because, as you said, it was really confronting an actress to probably her worst fear, and I think a movie is really when a director and a script meet an actor that is ready at the same time to tell the same story. And I totally understand that everyone is not ready for himself or herself to tell that story at certain points of his life. So I got many no's, for the part. And when we finally sent the script to Demi, at first I said, it's a great idea, but I think she will never want, to do something like that. I had this image of her hyper in control of her image, and not willing at all to go into those territories. But I said, let's try. We have nothing to lose. Just let's not wait too long for an answer. And it turned out that she clicked instantly on the script. She really understood it. And I think it resonated for her at a time of her life where she wanted to get the narrative of her own life and her own career back, not into other people's eyes, but for herself. And I think that what made her understand the potential of the film, the potential of the storytelling, and to let herself drive into this whole new territory of genre film, which requests a lot of technical challenges as well, which is what I discussed with her from the very start, because I wanted her to have all the cards, on the table to know what she was stepping into. So I discussed with her about everything, like, all the genre elements, the fact that it's very challenging, it takes a lot of time on set, the prosthetics that sometimes we needed to shoot not at all in the chronological order, the nudity aspect, of course, because the nudity is a real tool in the film. Each shot has a meaning and is there for a reason. And also the way we were going to shoot the film, because it was such an ambitious project with still quite a limited budget for everything we had to do. So the only way to achieve that and to make the movie possible was to shoot it in a very indie way. So, I designed the shooting in a very limited crew. We were shooting in France for more than 100 days. So it was a very challenging, not with the whole Hollywood, super production that she had been used to in the film that she was making. So it was very important for me to share all this, so there is no surprises, no bad surprise, and we all jump into the same boat. And I think that's what really bonded, the fact that we were making the film for the same reasons. And I think we were both ready at the same time to tell that story. And I think, also there is something that speaks through you with a film. And I think, yes, that's what happened for both of us on this project.
That's great. And for, for this very kind of humble production became a blockbuster around the world. It's really been so cool to see, and congratulations to you on all the recognition. And I look forward, we're going to continue this with the group in a moment, but first, let's welcome let's introduce a clip of our fifth honoree. He is an American who was nominated for the Best Directors Guild Award and is nominated for the Best Director Academy Award. Let's take a look at a scene from A Complete Unknown directed by James Mangold. Thank you. Please welcome James Mangold. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think that, and I know a lot of people share this feeling, you are such an interesting and rare kind of filmmaker, especially in today's world. It's almost like you're out of the golden age now, and I'll explain why I'm saying this.
I don't mind. Keep going.
Yeah. So I was interviewing not long ago one of your Complete Unknown stars, Oscar nominee Edward Norton, and we were talking about you and your filmography, and the closest comp that either of us could come up with is Howard Hawks, who was this great filmmaker of the golden age, who was always, you could always count on him. He was making solid, really good films, but he wasn't showy, and so he didn't get a lot of attention. He was not showing off as a filmmaker, and he worked across just about every genre that existed. And that brings me to mentioning some of your films. There have been, these are the films just that you've directed. Forget about all the others that you've produced or in other ways been involved with. Directed dramas, heavy Girl Interrupted, biopics, musical biopics like Walk the Line, Westerns, 310 to Yuma, crime thrillers, Copland, action movies, Ford v Ferrari. And that's a little reductive, but you get what I'm saying. Mystery horror, Identity, franchise films, The Wolverine, Logan, Indiana Jones, and the Dial of Destiny. How did you become a guy who can work in such varied formats of size and genre and scale? Like, was that always the ambition, or is that just sort of how it worked out?
I mean, it was always what I loved, meaning the wonderful filmmakers who preceded me out here, most of us grew up on movies, both we saw at art house theaters and in mainstream theaters, and we consumed all of them and worshipped all of them. And so I certainly, I hardly knew I was going to I would succeed at becoming a film director. So I certainly didn't have the temerity to know which kind I was going to become at an early stage, but I loved all these worlds. The only thing, and this is, it almost sounds evasive, but maybe it isn't, is it's true for me, is that when we think and talk and study film, when we debate film with each other, we put it in boxes. It makes it easier. It makes how we do everything easier. But as from my own personal experience making all these varied movies, the biggest thing I think as you're listing them is that they're not so different, and that the experience making them is not so different. I can be making a $250 million movie or a $25 million movie, and I still have to walk into a space with actors and a camera and make the scene work. And most of the rest of that money is going to visual effects or something else, but the core tasks at hand are identical on every film for me. The key, and the other thing that comes to mind is just that the boxes we're using make no sense, really. They're just useful for dialogue, but meaning you call Ford v Ferrari an action picture. Well, it could be called a biopic. It's a true story. But you don't call it a biopic because I guess it doesn't have someone singing in it, which I guess is the new requirement of a biopic. But Girl Interrupted could be called a biopic, but it's called a drama. So automatically these labels start to dissolve. And you could call Logan a superhero movie, but what the fuck is a superhero movie anyway? Meaning, is that a genre? It means like there's kind of fascistic suits and people put on latex and they live in a cave and their identity is secret and there's this genre called superhero movie? Or is it actually the myths we've been telling since the Greeks, only we've now called it superhero instead of calling it Hercules, and we've renamed it in some way, but it's not a genre at all, but just actually a franchise run by two particular studios that own the two largest comic book companies. So are these genre like noir and Western? Like, to me, if you said, what's Logan? I'd say it's a Western. Mm-hmm. So that's what I was thinking about when I made it. Certainly not, Kmart action figures. And so that's all. What's most interesting to me is the fact that we create these barriers which came out of film analysis, but they don't necessarily imply to what it is to make a movie, at least for me, which is to the investigation of the themes of the thing, and genre as more of a tool of where you're trying to misapply genre, like making a film about the Wolverine in the style of a Western becomes interesting to me. Where things become interesting is where you're taking something from another place and moving it into a place that seems philosophically potentially wrong, and that's really interesting.
Oh, that's a great answer. So, a complete unknown to we could go back to these boxes and comparisons and say, is it a relative of another great movie made 20 years ago, Walk the Line? There is the overlapping idea of, a study of a great musician. We actually have Johnny Cash showing up in Complete Unknown as well. But I guess what for you inspired you enough when you heard about when you basically, what set you off on writing this on spec essentially originally? Can you explain how, because, you know, that's not, I can't imagine you're doing a ton of that at this point.
No, but when you get excited about something, you just go after it. And well, I mean, in a lot of ways, I prefer to write that way anyway, because I kind of do even when they pay me, which is that I just kind of go, leave me alone for a long time. And but I'm really interested in the efforts, Brady was talking about this, the efforts people the efforts people go to make things, and these things, Susanna Kaysen of Girl Interrupted became a writer. Ford Ferrari it's titled like it's a competition between car companies, but it's really a kind of love story between two men who love to make cars and have a hard time doing it, and have a passion and a brilliance for it. Certainly that applies to Walk the Line, and I think it applies to this movie. There's really interesting stuff to me. I'm the son of two artists, two painters. The creative world is the world I've lived in all my life. And there's a million ways. Of course, I like Bob Dylan's music. It's a pleasure to enter the world of the folk scene of the 60s. I miss that New York. I miss that America. I miss the vibe and look of the world and the sounds of it and the smells of it. But what attracted me so profoundly was the idea that there was a concentrated story between Dylan's arrival in New York as a kind of, man with no name or man with a new name, and only 5 years later selling as many records as the Beatles and having this kind of breakaway, which brings us back to what you were asking me about, breaking out of the box of the way people had already confined him as a kind of genre act that needed to be doing a certain kind of thing and stay in that lane. And that was all really interesting to me. And then you add all the specificity and juice of Joan Baez and Bob Dylan and Pete Seeger, who I grew up loving. And I couldn't resist it. I had no idea if there was a commercial application for the project. I had no idea if anyone would want to see it. But I did love the idea of just living in that world for a while.
In terms of shaping this story,
Thank you.
You've had a lot of interesting mentors over the course of your time as a film student, all the way through. One of them is somebody who twice won the award that you're now nominated for the first time, Best Director Oscar. That was Milos Forman, won for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, but also for Amadeus, which is a movie that, interestingly, and you've been very open about this, was an influence on this. Can you talk about how that applies to A Complete Unknown and this idea of a genius at work?
Well, how would you put this? There's a kind of standard, something I did in Walk the Line, something many movies do. There's a kind of standard, almost Freudian dramatic structure, right? Which establishes a protagonist with a problem, maybe a trauma, a childhood trauma, some kind of damage they're carrying. And then somewhere in the story, presumably late in the second act, this thing is disabling them in their way, and they have to come to terms with it, speak its name. It could be Matt Damon in Robin Williams' therapy office. It could be Tim Hutton in Judd Hirsch's therapy office. It could be Johnny Cash talking to June Carter and saying, my father didn't love me. But the classic, and I'm reducing it to its base, but not to mock it, just to say that's one way of doing things, and it's been done many times. I didn't feel like I could do that with Dylan. I didn't feel like it applied. I couldn't identify a kind of trauma he was carrying that he was going to have to escape from. Although in the making of the movie, I kind of did find one. But so what I went looking for was a way, you know, when I made Girl Interrupted, for those who know the movie, it was The Wizard of Oz. Well, how do I tell this story? A young woman who's depressed, who lands in a circumscribed universe from which she can't escape. She meets all these incredible people who are fractalizations of her own personality, and ultimately discovered she could have gotten out anytime she wanted. Oh, fuck, it's The Wizard of Oz. And that really helped me. And in this case, I went, oh shit, it's Amadeus. And it may be a movie about Bob Dylan, but I need to really get underneath all these supporting players, because what's most interesting about genius isn't the question of where it comes from, which I don't think is answerable in any concrete way, but how we all react to it. I mean, I wasn't going to turn someone into a pure Salieri and wish death upon Bob, but although I'm sure there were people who did, but the reality is I did want to explore that relationship of the person who doesn't have that volcano, who may be really creative, incredibly sharp, but just that's not there for them. Also, the people who want to commodify it or make money from it, the people who hate it, the people who fall in love with talent just to get closer to it, that there was a kind of whole orbit. And when I get to where I thought I could almost identify what his burden was that I hadn't thought of when I started, which came out of meeting with him a bit, but also this process of exploration, it was, it's awesome to be talented, but it's also lonely. Because it means that you're separated from everyone. Because while everyone is looking at you like you're amazing, or envying you, or wanting to own you, or wanting to commodify you, what they're not doing is actually being truly intimate with you. What they're doing is seeing you as a kind of volcano or creative machine, and you're alone as much as they feel alone with you. And it suddenly made me kind of understand another kind of dynamic, which is when someone's plugged into something, which in my own modest way, I think a lot of us who make things can identify with. When you're really plugged in or wired into an idea, something gives on your personal life. It's not even. You can't clock out of the creative life and clock into the normal life and clock out again. There is some kind of trade-off. And if you're in as deep as Bob was, where he even admitted on 60 Minutes a decade ago, like, I don't know where it came from, that you're channeling something. And maybe some of that is what we called his arrogance or ambiguity or evasiveness, is actually the fact that he was living in two places at the same time, one that we can't fathom and one that was present. And that can look like many things, but maybe and that became another thing that Timothy and I really explored, behind the scenes.
Well, last night, last night we got to hear from one of your Oscar-nominated stars of this movie, Monica Barbaro. Later this week, we'll be hearing from another here at Santa Barbara, Timothy Chalamet.
That's tomorrow, isn't it?
Tomorrow.
I hope so, because I'm here for it.
Yes. There's also, of course, Edward Norton. So 3 actors from this great ensemble are individually recognized. You writing, directing, and producing. It's been cool to see just how people have caught on with this movie.
It's lovely. It's been really rewarding to see people embrace the movie, and that's really what it's all about. That's what you toil for.
Awesome.
So that's really great.
Well, thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
We are now going to do something kind of cool, which is this part, is not that exciting. We're going to play a ad, but while that ad is playing, that's
True theater experience.
That's gonna buy us a few minutes to set up the stage so that we can bring out all 5 of tonight's honorees for a closing group chat. But thank you, James Mangold.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
These chairs are hilarious.
Ugg chairs.
They're fuzzy.
Comfy. So this is a kind of it's a unique opportunity to get the 5 of you all together to pick your brain about each other and the year in film and your crazy experience that you've gone through together this season. Just a few more weeks remaining. I wonder, though, since we've got 5 experts up here, if you could share something about one and only one, because I know everybody's inclination is to be polite and probably say something nice about everyone, but one of the other people's films up here that really impressed you as a filmmaker. And Jim, could you start us off?
Well, I could say something about everyone here, but the first thing that occurred to me was in Jacques' film, the kind of boldness to just ram genre together, not in a holistic sense, but that they're almost colliding. From the moment you land in that film, there's a sense, a very bold, I don't know if I'm bold enough, a kind of that he's almost hitting his own film with bumper cars. And one genre is crashing into the next, and there's a kind of beautiful whiplash you get in that film as you realize you're in the hands of a director who's kind of fearlessly spinning the wheel and taking you on this kind of incredibly zigzagging, but at the same time it starts to fuse into a single direction. Anyway, if that made any sense.
That's great.
Thank you.
Did you understand?
Yes, absolutely. Je comprends tous les compliments.
I always understand compliments.
Thank you. So, Coralie, take it away, Coralie.
That's a tough question because there is so much to say about each of the directors tonight. What I love is that I think each one has a very distinctive personality. That's what I see in their work. As I'm seated next to you, one of the movies that I really loved was Walk the Line. That gave me this sense of, cinema, like you go for an adventure and you feel, and also I love Johnny Cash, so it was it was a powerful film that made me feel joyful.
Thank you. Brady.
I'm not answering this question. No, I mean seriously, because the thing is that, like, I mean, as I said before, I'm genuinely impressed by all of the movies for very different reasons, and I mean, it's impossible. Like I can't.
It's not saying a favorite. It's saying something that stood out to you about.
But it means something. And it's the first thing comes to mind. I can't really answer the question.
All right. We'll skip you. We'll skip you. Fair enough.
But I listen. I think that it's as I've mentioned before. I think it's a very interesting crop of movies this year that are very radical and very special films, and I'm honored to be up here with all these folks. I just can't single anyone out.
Sean, can you be a little more helpful?
Not really. No, but I feel the same way. It is, you're putting us on the spot here. I want to say something about every one of these wonderful filmmakers' films. But I do. Maybe I'll use it. I'll tell an anecdote instead, a story. I took my crew, my entire cast, my main cast, out to the AMC Grove to see The Substance. And it was almost more of a bonding experience than the actual making of the movie. We had so much fun. I was watching Vache's face and Yura's face as it just got more extreme and more extreme. And we absolutely loved it. It was like for me, it was a return to, for me, the films that I grew up with and that I love so much, that are bold and just no holds barred at all, So yeah.
Thank you. Jacques.
Mais Sean, tu m'as pris mon choix.
But Sean, you took my choice.
Sorry, man.
Alors, moi, je trouve que de Substance est un film qui m'a franchement flanqué par terre.
The Substance just knocked me down to the ground.
J'avais pas vu une organisation formelle aussi puissante depuis très longtemps.
I hadn't seen such a powerful, formal organization in a very long time.
Et que les rapports du film avec... pour moi, c'est un film qui appartiendrait presque au domaine du muet. Et ça m'a vraiment bouleversé.
For me, it's a film that nearly belongs to the world of silent film, and that's something that really moved me tremendously.
On se souvient bien sûr tous de l'intertitre dans Nosferatu. Il passa le pont et les fantômes vinrent à sa rencontre.
We all, of course, remember the intertitle in Nosferatu. They crossed the bridge, or he crossed the bridge, and the ghosts came to meet him.
Et ben, ton film a fait cet effet-là.
Your film had that effect on me.
So we don't have to go in any particular order for this one, but you guys, at every of the many screenings that you've had of your films, I'm sure there are people that come up to you and have different thoughts and comments that they want to share. Some of them are probably out there, but I would love to ask you, what has been the most memorable and interesting piece of feedback that somebody's given to you about your film that maybe even made you think about it in a slightly different way? Has there been could be a review, it could be a person coming up to you. Has there been anything that really kind of jolted you when you heard it about your film? Pass? All right, we'll go to the...
I'll answer that one.
Thank you.
The two small things I mean that come to mind is that Daniel Libeskind, the architect behind One World Trade Center and the Jewish Museum in Berlin, wrote a piece about the film that was, every once in a while you do something and you feel really seen. I felt really seen by Daniel Libeskind's piece. And finally, the filmmaker behind a film called Coda from a couple of years ago, Sean, her father is suffering from dementia, and he watched the entire film, and he's Hungarian. And she shared with me that it was the first time that they'd had, a conversation in a long time about something, because there's these moments of lucidity, and that was very, very touching. It was just a couple nights ago. It's fresh in mind.
That's great. Thanks. Got nothing? All right, we'll go to the next one. What is the question that you have each been asked the most on the press tour and making the rounds that you would be thrilled to just never have to answer ever again?
What's your favorite Bob Dylan song?
And we won't make you answer it unless you want to.
I won't.
Okay, good.
Don't do it, Scott.
No, I won't.
It's stupid.
That's it. Who's got, Jacques, what's the question you're the most...
Pardon, moi j'en étais à la question précédente.
I was still thinking about the previous question.
Okay.
Mais je peux y répondre ou pas?
You can
Can I
take
still answer
whichever
it?
one you'd like.
Parce que le moment le plus étonnant que j'ai eu pendant la tournée, c'était avec Roger Durling. C'était une conversation avec Roger Durling. Je trouve cet homme extraordinairement brillant, vraiment très très brillant. Il a mis le doigt sur certains trucs que j'avais fait et que j'avais oubliés. J'ai été ébloui.
The conversation I had on this campaign that most stunned and surprised me was with Roger Durling. He's really he's an extremely brilliant person, and he really went to points that I had completely forgotten about.
That's great. High praise. Anybody? No? Okay. I will note, this is only the third year in the 97 years history of the Oscars, after 2018 and 2023, that every one of the Best Director nominees was also a credited writer of the film for which they're nominated. And it's only the second year in Oscars history, after 2018, in which every Best Director nominee is also a screenplay nominee. I guess if push came to shove and somehow you guys had to identify which one of those two things you derive more pleasure or maybe less pain from, writing or directing, which
might that be?
Sean, it looks like
Writing's the hardest thing for me. Yeah, I think it's when you're alone and you're just breaking that story. You don't know whether you got something that'll work. It's torture. It's absolute torture. That's why I end up kind of rewriting when I'm directing.
Right.
Maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
Are you asking if we had to let one go, or just what's harder?
we don't have to go as far as letting one go, but
Yeah. I mean, I view it all as the same activity. That, I mean, we've talked about this as a group before, but that writing is writing and directing is writing and editing is writing and mixing is writing. And that you're affecting the narrative in every time you change the sound of a scene, you're affecting the narrative. Every time you obviously change the cut of a scene or take something in or out, that's writing. When you're deciding how to move the actors and how they're saying and doing what they're doing, you're clearly writing. And obviously the writing is writing. And so the reason we divide the duties is more about divisions of labor and than it is about a kind of process of creation, which is, at least to me, is very pure. Even when I'm collaborating, as I did on this and other films with collaborator writers, you're leading, as I'm collaborating on the edit and collaborating on the shoot, you're leading something, and you're leading something from birth all the way to fruition. And I think I love all the films by the filmmakers to my left, and part of what I love about each of the films is that I feel their voice in every way. I feel the screenwriter's voice united with the directorial frame and the blocking and the mise-en-scène. I feel the editing aligned with the writing. I don't feel any kind of war or push or pull, except a good tension going on in each of these marvelous films. And they're each unique, meaning their style, their tempo, the way they're cut, the way they're fabricated is so obviously different and so obviously built from the page up. And those are almost always been my favorite films in my life, and continue to be.
Very nice, thank you. We feel the same of A Complete Unknown.
Coralie?
I agree with Sean. Writing is hell. But that's because for me, I know that everything takes shapes during the writing because I really write what I'm going to direct and what I'm going to edit. And it's the first time that you put your guts on the page. You're going to put your guts in the film many, many times during the process, but it's the one where you're really in the process of creating something that nobody has asked for. So you really have, to trust yourself and to, have, a lot of nerves not to fall apart and to keep thinking that what you want to write is worth existing. But yes, with the pain then comes the relief and the joy of, fulfilling an accomplishment.
Alors, vous m'auriez posé la question il y a une dizaine d'années, j'aurais répondu sans conteste, le scénario était l'endroit où j'étais le mieux.
Had you asked me this question 10 years ago, I would have answered without a doubt, the screenplay is where I feel best.
Que maintenant, je prends de plus en plus de plaisir à tourner, à diriger, et je m'en excuse.
Now I take more and more pleasure shooting and directing, and I apologize for that.
Okay, what is one great film from 2024
that is not represented on this stage that you would encourage people to check out that they might not already know about? This is a chance to highlight something you loved. Sean?
Can I say two?
You're absolutely.
Robert Edgar's Nosferatu, I think, is brilliant, and I think the craft is impeccable. And Catherine Brillet's Last Summer, which I think is underseen and should be seen.
Great, thank you. Anyone who would like to go next? Coralie?
Yes, I really loved Baby Girl. And also The Girl with the Needle. And I think there are two very powerful stories about women's stories that we don't get to hear often. And I think, those are great movies I encourage you to discover.
Absolutely. Brady?
I was shooting a lot this year, so I didn't see very much, but a film that I was on the jury in Berlin last year, and we gave the Golden Bear to Matty Diop's film Dahomey, which is a film that I love. I think it's actually kind of a seminal documentary, and at just 68 minutes, it's unbelievably precise. The filmmaking is like insane. It's insane.
Yeah, absolutely.
Je suis désolé, je crois que je n'ai pas vu de film en 2024.
I'm so sorry. I don't think I saw any movies in 2024.
Moi, je travaillais, je n'allais pas au cinéma. Moi, je travaillais, je n'allais pas au cinéma.
I was working. I wasn't going to the movies.
Okay. Jim, did you squeeze in any?
I'm blanking on what I would answer this question with that hasn't, in one forum or another we've been in, gotten. But the one that jumps to my mind today is Pig. But it's 3 years old or 4 years old. But I fucking love that movie, and for some reason that jumped in my mind. So it's still living.
Take the recommendation. That's good.
Yes,
Nicolas Cage, right?
Yes. If you haven't seen it, check it out.
Yes.
Let's go back to like 1907.
Was Pig made in I love wings.
Yeah.
I was talking about the old Nosferatu.
All right, last question. Starting down with Jacques and coming back to Jim. What is the one thing that you are most looking forward to doing after March 2nd, the date of the 97th Academy Awards?
Dormir.
Sleep.
Sean.
Pouvoir lire un peu.
And to be able to read a little bit.
Very good, very good.
Well, you know, while you do this, which we are incredibly fortunate to be doing, you can't work. So I can't wait to make the next film, quite honestly. I'm going to get on the road. I'm going to get on the road and find some, I won't tell you what city, but it's pulling me.
That's great.
And I'm going.
Exciting. All right, Brady.
I mean, I'm going to do those things too. I'm going to sleep, and then I'm going to work. I'm going to read, for Christ's sakes. I'm going to fucking read. And I'm going to spend time with my daughter. It's insane being away from her so much at a time in her life where, like, she's going to be a teenager very, very soon, and I just want to be with my kid. That's all for now. But yes, and sleep near my daughter. That's
Coralie.
Yeah, quite the same. Like, really take a break, like to reset my brain to be able to go back to the hell of writing.
Yes. Jim, any like cruises or anything coming up?
I would love that. Not a cruise sounds awful, but a trip. I don't know. I see those ads where there's these like skyscrapers on a barge with a slide on top, and I go, "Who the fuck wants to do that?" But so no cruises, at least that kind.
Okay.
I mean, maybe if Steven has a free spot on his yacht, I'll go.
Right.
But No, writing, I mean, everything everyone said, but, I have this theory that there is no, I mean, I teach sometimes and, people ask about writer's block, and I kind of refuse to accept such a thing exists. And I think of writer's block is that you don't know what to write. That's why you can't write. So go away from your typewriter or your keyboard and do something else until you have an idea what to write. And like, you don't go to your kitchen and you don't know what you're cooking. So why do you go to your typewriter and not know what you're writing? Go think of it and then get it so it's burning in your brain, and then you sit down and holy shit, I'm writing. And I don't know about the other my compatriots up here, but this process, I feel like the person who keeps thinking of things I want the time to write down, and I don't have it. So I'm kind of burning to have the opposite of writer's block, which is kind of will be some kind of diuretic writing and then realizing it's all shit and getting back to the depressing place.
Well, thank you guys so much for coming here, and have fun the rest of the way. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This is very cozy. Thank you.
Brady, in 3 films, The Childhood of a Leader, which is a chamber piece, Vox Lux, a pop art extravaganza, and now The Brutalist. It's an ambitious 1950s epic. Corbet, you have shown boldness, vision, and reach. Keep raising the bar, and you keep raising the stakes, and we're the beneficiaries of your incredible talent. Thank you, Brady. Coralie Fargeat, in The Substance, you display assured. Yeah, I know. This is like a night at the opera here. Coralie, in The Substance, you have displayed such assured direction, paired with creative imagery, visceral set pieces, and extraordinary energy. I'm so impressed with your knowledge of cinema, quoting Kubrick, Cronenberg, and Hitchcock while holding a mirror to us all, the audience, where you revealed to us our own hidden fears about ourselves. Bravo, Coralie. Sean Baker, you've been a friend of mine and a friend of the film festivals for over a decade, and you've been coming to SBIFF to watch films, to be surrounded by us, and we love you. You're such a mensch. But your style feels revolutionary in our current cinema. But it harks back to the neo-realism style of post-World War II Europe, which thrive on realism and showcasing underrepresented communities in Italy. I love that in the last shot of Anora, you pay homage to Fellini's Nights of Cabiria with Giulietta Massina's Single Tear. Baker shows incredible humanity and compassionately you showcase outcasts and the struggle of everyday people in the U.S. Thank you, Sean. James, your films all of them are emotionally centered and so vital. All of them visually striking. I respect how you use long stretches of shots without dialogue to build a rapport amongst your characters. I see the influence of Ozu's in your work. And for many years, your artistry has been taken for granted. And I'm so glad we've caught up finally with your greatness. And last but not least, Audiard, I was deeply moved by your words about me backstage. I started getting teared up. As a matter of fact, I want to say about all of you tonight, and thank you, Scott, for hosting such a gorgeous conversation, is that I, as a film geek, as a film lover, and I'm probably speak for a lot of you out in the audience, I live for cinema. I feel the most alive when I am watching movies, and I feel the most alive when I'm listening to filmmakers. So tonight, because of the 5 of you, for you on stage, I've never felt more alive. So thank you. And Jacques, Jacques, your genre bending style that mirrors your characters. Your characters are constantly changing. And you show us in your films, characters are giving a second chance. And we ride on that journey vicariously, on the triumph and high of their journey, for we all deserve a second chance. And you show us in the film that we are capable of changing, we're capable of evolving, and we're capable of becoming better human people. And thank you so much. To the five of you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And we have awards for you, gang. Bring their, oh, there we go. So you don't go home empty-handed. Okay, so now,
I'm sorry.
that's all right. Thank you, everybody.